maybe I'll just do a very quick recap on from the start of this slide for those who missed it. So basically this slide, the key messages here is talking about the importance of making sure that before we actually have any kind of meaningful work from home strategy or flexi remote working, there are 3 steps that we need to be very clearly aware of and conscious in terms of our planning. First step is to look at all our data that we use, the information that we need, the source of information, how we use them, and then we talk about how to make this into a digital version. So from a hard copy, from a token, whatever, how do I make it into a form that I can use, not just from a digital manner, but how do I distribute it? How do I apply a workflow to it? How do I implement maker checker, 4I principle, using all these newly digital data? The next step then is to look at what are my processes. So even if I have all my data in a fully digital format now, I no longer rely on any hard copy documents, any files, but my processes need to be in place on how I can utilize this data. So frequently we find a lot of clients that they have to really relook at their end-to-end processes. The way they do things need to be rethought through. They need to redesign some of those processes, and even some of the mindsets and habits of humans have to change. Then finally, the 4th step is to do digital transformation, which now goes beyond your data, your processes. Now we go into how do I even think about offering new offerings, new businesses, new channels, new ways of helping our target people, and via all these digital means. So that is the key message. So I may now go on because I'm running out of time. Okay, so this is just a quick chart to share some of the statistics from BCI. So some of you may be aware, in this world there are 2 international business continuity management organizations that offers professional certification to individuals. One of it is DRII from the US, Disaster Recovery International Institute, and the second one is BCI from UK, which is Business Continuity Institute, right? So BCI actually published this sometime in March, if I'm not wrong, to talk about what are the key risks and threats for the past 12 months. And you can see the top one was health incidents, and the 5th one was cyber attack and data breach. And they expect the next 12 months to the top one to be cyber attack and data breach now, right? So as COVID-19 has shown us, a lot of companies now accelerated their digital program because they don't really have a choice. Everyone is forced to think digital. But because, you know, sometimes things like this, you can't really rush. You need enough time to think through what are the security loopholes, what are the OS that need to be patched, what kind of firewalls I need to put in place, etc. So there is now this big debate now called the telehealth cybersecurity weaknesses. So which means that because the medical institution starts to open up very rapidly and venturing into areas where they are actually not familiar, because the healthcare sector has always been very face-to-face, right? So suddenly now they are forced to think very quickly on how to do teleconsult, right? A lot of these mobile devices, which have not really been well tested or secured, are now put into use, and the doctors, the nurses are now using mobile devices to look at their patients and do triage from a remote manner, right? So if we look at the next slide here, there are, I mean, I've a team of cyber experts within PwC that I constantly talk to because we run a lot of cybersecurity exercises for our clients. Now it seems that there are some new COVID-19 team cyber attacks out there. So when we say COVID-19 team, we're not saying that there is suddenly a new technology or new software that is used that uses some COVID-19 related. All it took was for the attackers to, when they write a phishing email, instead of writing the standard stuff like, oh, you have won a lucky draw, some of the more common ones we see is that, oh, I'm Captain so and so, and I've got loved ones who passed away, and I need to, So those people look at it, one look, it's quite clear that it's a scam. But now they are quite smart. They use all these COVID-19 related emails, websites. So if you look at some of these examples I have on this screen, if I were to receive an email that seems to come from my company, PwC, telling me, oh, there is now the company has purchased a new COVID-19 related insurance policy, and you need to click on this link in order to update your own particulars and your dependent details. Honestly, I think I would click. So so it opens up a lot of vulnerabilities in terms of people's preconceived ideas of what a scam email looks like. So some of these things, there are now higher instances of people actually falling prey to some of these fake emails, fake websites, and they actually go and click, right? So just recently, we've been hearing that there is a spike in the number of ransomware cases. A lot of some companies in Singapore have actually been attacked, and I just spoke to one of the potential clients a few weeks ago, and they were in a state of panic because they found themselves waking up in the morning one day and all their data are gone. And this is a very old company in Singapore, easily 50, 60 years history in Singapore, right? And they find that their data are completely gone. Okay, so so without any more details, let me go to the next slide. Okay, but okay, so end of the day, let's assume that all our IT, our OS are the latest, the loopholes are closed, we have done the best firewall, the best settings. End of the day, even my most expert cybersecurity guys in the company agrees on one thing. There's only so much you can do and prevent an attack, but it is never a matter of if, but a matter of when. Okay, so even cybersecurity experts think that of course, you need to be constantly updated. You need to constantly scan the horizon, understand what are the latest threats out there, making sure that your operating systems are patched timely, etc. And a lot of awareness on the people, because I can have the best technology preventive measures, but all it takes is for my user to accidentally click on something and download that small little file, and the small little file starts to communicate back to its host and start to download even more stuff. And from there, it can become a malware to attack you, become a ransomware to encrypt your data, or become something that steals your data and sells it. So all it takes is a person to really accidentally click and things will happen. So the idea is this: despite all our best efforts in preventing all these attacks from a technology perspective, what really does it mean to the business, to people like you and me, to the business users, if you are actually attacked, right? So typically what we have seen from our discussions with other companies and all, there are 4 key areas which we need to think of. So the first one is, and of course this revolves around the CIA concepts: confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? So the first one, which is confidentiality, data theft and privacy loss. So if your information, which contains personal information, sensitive information, and for some of you even medical details of people, then some of this will be privacy loss, which then can lead to reputational impact, loss of confidence, and what have you. So in terms of your existing BCM or business continuity program, in terms of your incident response plans, in terms of your crisis communications plans, your insurance policies, do we have some of this covered? Do we know what to do? Do we have the correct withholding statements and crisis comms plans to handle such a situation? The second one is data corruption. So if, for example, like ransomware, they come in, they tell you pay 200 Bitcoins, I will give you back your data. But we have also heard horror stories where companies they pay up, the hacker gives them the key to unencrypt, and the key doesn't work, and the data are all gone anyway. So we have heard some of that, and that is because there are actually now a lot of services. Okay, I'm not sure if you've heard this before, but there's this thing called malware as a service, and that was like 1-2 years ago, and now they have ransomware as a service, right? So people like me, totally technically challenged, don't know any coding at all. I mean, I've given it all back to school. I can pay a subscription fee to a website and use their ransomware software to attack others, and I don't need to be technical at all. So some of these people either, well, okay, some of it we call leisure hackers, right? So it's like they're doing it because they can, right? So unlike the traditional hacker mentality, there are some key ones like they are, hacktivists, where it's really for money. They want to have financial gain, or it is state sponsored, um, state sponsored actors where they are doing it for political reasons to make the other country look bad, reputation, stuff like that. And of course, then there's this third category, which is leisure hackers. Some maybe just want to try. They don't really have a firm ideology or a passion for financial gain, but they're just trying because they can, right? Then the fourth category is data manipulation. So this has happened before in the financial industry. I'm not sure if you all heard of this system called Swift, which is an internet banks. So Swift had a okay, it wasn't Swift that was attacked, it was a bank's payment system that was attacked. But the malware was so good that it could actually go into the bank's payment engine, manipulate the Swift message and change the name and address and the account number of the ultimate beneficiary. So to the bank, they are transferring to the correct bank. They're paying the money to the correct bank as far as their checks are concerned. But they missed out that small little few 72, for example, in Swift that results in another account being credited. So that was under the data manipulation, and there are some other data that they can manipulate depending on what they need to do. And the biggest one is actually healthcare sector as well. Then last but not least, in fact, the biggest one is service disruption. And this is the most critical and painful for, practically every business out there that has got a presence on the internet, right? And once you experience service disruption, of course, your customer unhappiness will come in. They are trying to book an appointment, but they can't, and they've been trying for the past 2 days, and your website is down, right? So, and sometimes it need not even be a real successful attack, right? It can be just, for example, a massive brute force DDoS attack, where the hacker just basically activates the attack using different devices. So DDoS attack basically means that they have actually managed to download themselves into people's devices by lay dormant. On the day that they decide to, they trigger the attack, and basically your website gets attacked by multiple different IP addresses across tens of thousands of devices. So what happens is the website, even though it's not hacked per se, it is overwhelmed and it crashes and it stops. So that leads to your website, your portal, your login to be down, right? So what are some of the alternative arrangements that we can think of, etc.? Okay, so I've got not much time left. Let me move a bit faster. Okay, so I think without really going too much into every line by line, which I won't, I think it's quite clear to all of us why do charities, like any other organization out there, needs to have proper cybersecurity protection measures in place. So of course, loss of revenue, reputation, productivity, and the cost of recovering after your attack, right? So I'll just leave some of this research. In fact, if you're interested, some of these facts came from the source, which is down there at the bottom of the slide. Okay, but maybe I'll just cover a little bit more on in terms of the productivity and recovery portion. So productivity is making sure that even after you attack, right, there are a lot of the activities which you need to do in order to minimize the PR damage, right, and to make sure that people's confidence in your organization is not too badly affected, and that you have a plan in place to communicate, and to make sure you clarify and be very clear. So, for example, if there are data that's been stolen, and you know that some of your customers are affected, it is always better to tell them upfront so that they can take steps to minimize further loss. Like, for example, if I know that some of the personal data are stolen and I tell them early, they can quickly go to the various websites and all, maybe change their passwords, maybe even close their account if they have to. But if we don't tell them because we are afraid of the repercussions, and we keep it until the very last possible moment that we have to, it may already have caused damage to them. Yeah. And of course, recovery. So recovery, typically for an IT system, your data backup, what are your recovery time objectives? I think all that is beyond a 30-minute sharing session. But I think we will always be happy to talk to you about some of your BCM programs and ITDR. Okay, the last few slides. So this one basically is, again, the scope of this, I cannot really go into a full BCM program, but suffice to say, if you get a copy of this later, this is a typical BCM framework where I have my incident response plans, my crisis plans, I do a proper BIA to make sure I understand what are the real critical business functions that I need to protect, right? Without a proper BIA, I'm basically trying to protect everything, or I'm going by gut feel. So a proper BIA really forces you to think, given that I only have $10, how do I spend this $10 wisely? So a BIA is really to help you. Okay, so and then of course there are the BCP plans, and then you run exercises. Exercises, again, there are many different ways of exercises, and different exercises have got different objectives. That some exercises are really meant to practice the people, some are meant to rehearse the processes, some are meant to really validate your IT readiness. So I don't have time to get there. Okay, so preventive measures, I think again, some of these are pretty standard. If you look at all these are all the six up here are mainly the IT related controls. So making sure that your passwords minimum 8 to 10 characters, you must have uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters, etc. I think if you do that, it's at least harder for people to guess. So I think if you saw, if I can just quickly go back to this slide, here. If you look at this slide here, I've got to mention 75%, so based on this UK study, out of 10,000 passwords, 87% had accounts where the passwords are the very easily guessed ones, even by a bot. Okay, so with this in mind, passwords are very important. So try not to have passwords that has got anything to do with you, for example. Then of course we talk about firewalls, your access controls, which is your access rights, and it has to be on a need to have basis by different user profile groups. I don't just give the same access to everyone in the company, right? So I will give based on the different job nature and on the need to basis, because that's, and not anything more, right? And of course, your monitoring software, your security, and of course, making sure that your systems are always updated and patched regularly. But I purposely put the last one here, and I mentioned this just now. The weakest link continues from all the studies out there. The weakest link continues to be humans. So just to share, I think within our own company, there are companies that actually does periodic tests. So they will purposely send you emails and make it look very real and convincing, and see whether you fall for it. But thankfully, it's an internal test. So if you fail, someone will email you and say, okay, that was a test, and you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. Yeah. Okay, then the last two slides, which is dealing with new normal. So I don't think I'll read line by line, but basically the whole idea is this. As I mentioned right at the start, a review of what you have currently, how you do things, the data you need is important. So especially, I think for some of the charities organizations where I think traditionally is mainly a face-to-face kind of a industry. So how do you actually then continue to engage your various customers, right? And also how can you effectively get the services across to them, and yet not be in a situation where we will continue to spread the virus. And also from a business continuity perspective, right? There are differences in how an industry like this need to consider in terms of the BCM planning and what is important versus the banks, versus the education sector, which I also work with, and versus the marine sector, which I also work with, right? So I think each sector and even each company within the sector has got very unique needs, which should be considered on a case-by-case basis and analyze based on your own risk appetite, your own internal policies and strategies, and your own importance in terms of the impact assessment. Okay, and the last slide is on the dealing with new normal. So now I think there are a lot of talk about the psychology of people working from home for too long. There will be two extremes. One group will say, I love this so much, I don't want to go back office anymore. Another group just says that, you know what, if I don't meet another human being soon, I'm going to go crazy, right? So I think we need to be aware that there are different range of people out there that has got different needs. So it's always important to make sure that even while we're all working remotely, there are conscious efforts to make sure that we remain available for each other. And good thing is, yesterday the government just announced that they are relaxing further on the measures. So fantastic. More of us can now go back to the office, stay in touch, catch up with our colleagues, and basically have that human-to-human interaction. Then, of course, the other part is, as we now get more flexible, the new normal is that maybe companies will not have 100% time in the office anymore, but they will encourage work from home partially, maybe from wherever you are, especially for us in the advisory business, where I'm always out there. So I can be working in Starbucks, I can be at home, or I can be at a void deck or the lift lobby, right? And I think information security is something that we cannot overlook as well. So it's not just about IT security or cyber security, it's information security. So very, very simple thing is, when I'm working from home, I make sure the window behind me is not open. And when I'm talking on the phone, I make sure the door is closed and the window is closed so that people don't hear what I'm saying and what customer I'm talking about and how much I'm doing for them and all, right? So the last column is really, these are quite common sense things, but basically is try to set clear boundaries and times. I think I've heard a lot of feedback from a lot of colleagues that when we work from home, we find that our working hours became a lot longer because there are no longer any boundaries. And a lot of us find that we're working all the time. Like each time, every time I have some moment in between meetings, I'm still at the laptop and I'm still checking emails, I'm still reading stuff, I'm still preparing proposals and all. So I think setting boundaries also helps in the mental well-being of all of us. I think I've overrun my time horribly. I shall stop here, and in case there are any questions, thank you so much for your attention.